Hello and welcome to the first episode of While You Were Gaming, a show in partnership with theconsoleexplosion.com and hosted by me, Ian, the Historicnerd. Today's episode is going to be about the Atari 2600. Released September 11, 1977, the system was one of the first, or the second, system to use ROM-based memory cartridges. So, this show is going to focus around the 2600, and also expand on what was going on politically, culturally, and globally when the system came out, and what events shaped its success and almost failure. So welcome to While You Were Gaming. One of the direct driving forces behind the Atari 2600 was that prior consoles had been built with a limited number of games on them, and there was no way to expand these for later releases of other games to sell with the unit to increase profit. Later, Hewlett-Packard designed a computer system that allowed for the use of removable ROM cartridges, and this essentially would allow the system to be expandable and buy more programs for it at later times. Atari aggressively pursued the idea of using removable cartridges for future systems. In 1976, Fairchild Semiconductors released their own CPU-based system that also used ROM cartridges. The Atari 2600, codenamed Stella at this point, which was named after one of the engineer's bikes, was still not ready for production, but it was very clear that it needed to get to market quickly, before a massive number of imitation products began to flood the market, in similar fashion to what happened to the Atari Pong systems. Atari didn't have the capital to get the system to market quickly. Considering that the Pong systems were slowing, Atari's revenue stream was beginning to shrink. Nolan Bushnell eventually turned to Warner Communications and sold the company to them in 1976 for $28 million on an agreement that the Stella would be funded and put to market as soon as possible. When the 2600 was initially brought to market, it retailed for $199. But at this point it wasn't called the 2600, it was actually called the Video Computer System. And this was a move to directly compete with Fairchild Semiconductors, because their system was actually named the Video Entertainment System. In other situations, the Atari 2600 was also rebranded by Sears as the Sears Video Arcade, and this was exclusively sold at Sears Roebucks. When Fairchild discovered that Atari was naming their system closely after theirs, they quickly renamed theirs the Channel F. Both systems at this point began a massive battle for market dominance. But what ended up happening was a gigantic round of price cutting, because the Pong clones that had been out there became obsolete overnight once these systems began to compete with each other, and were sold off at a considerable discount. This unfortunately impacted the market, and caused a bit of oversaturation among consumers, who were slow to adapt and buy the 2600 or the Channel F. The initial poor sales of the Atari 2600 led to a disagreement between Warner Communications and Nolan Bushnell, and caused him to leave the company. But after a year of straight fighting with the Channel F for market dominance, Fairchild Semiconductors gave up and threw in the towel, and just began to consider video games a passing fad because of their inability to make aggressive profits. So, by 1979, the Atari became the #1 Christmas gift, and after this long battle, it cemented Atari's dominance as the #1 video game manufacturer in the United States. Alright, now that we've covered the Atari 2600, let's talk about other events of 1977 and how they impacted the popular culture of the time. One of the first major events to occur in 1977 was the release of Star Wars. One of perhaps the most successful film ever released at that point in time. It grossed $465 million domestically, and I think over $775 million globally, making it the highest grossing film up until that point. And it wouldn't be dethroned until 1983, when the E.T. came out. On a more Star Trek related note, you have the brand new shuttle that was built by NASA being renamed. After a massive letter writing campaign from Star Trek fans, it was renamed to the Enterprise. And in a wonderful inaugurational event for the spacecraft, the original series crew was there present at the basic launching of the spacecraft. So it was kind of a wonderful new era. And also, something that was kind of fun about that is, if you think about it, the drawing of the Enterprise on Archer's wall in his ready room is kind of a paradox, because it wasn't named the Enterprise because of that, it was named because of the show. So it's just kind of a fun little tidbit there. Yet a number of other really interesting events happened in 1977 as well. You had Jimmy Carter beating Gerald Ford in a national election, with 297 electoral votes to Gerald Ford's 240, and oddly enough, Ronald Reagan got one electoral vote in that election. Kind of surprising. But also, something else really important that came out in 1977 was the Apple II was also launched. and it was the first commercial product that Apple ever sold, and kind of cemented them in the personal computer business. A good number of events occurred in 1977, so I'm going to have two that kind of round out the end of this. You have the Voyager space probe, which basically was launched this year, or in 1977, to explore the deeper reaches of our solar system. And then, kind of to end this whole endeavor, for 1977, you have the Ethiopian-Somali War, a conflict which ended up in the complete destruction of the Somali government, resulting in a relative state of anarchy in the country. And that event has had greater ramifications for the last 30 years, as essentially Somalia has struggled to rebuild itself and establish any type of governance. So, something like that still impacts us to this day. And that ends this segment of While You Were Gaming. I want to thank you very much for dropping by and watching this. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any other events in 1977, gaming related or historically related, please let me know in the comments below, or Twitter me, or whatever you want to say. But thanks for watching. If you like this content, I highly suggest you check out my website, Historicnerd.com. I also highly suggest you check out theconsoleexplosion.com. It has a number of other content providers there that generate quite a bit of good work that you might find enjoyable. If you want to say something to me directly, feel free to contact me at @historicalnerd on Twitter.com. So feel free. Alright, thank you very much for dropping by. Have a great night, evening, or day, whatever it is you're doing. Bye.